It's a pleasure to introduce today's distinguished speaker, Dr. Rachel Levy. And then Dr. Levy is the inaugural executive director of the Data Science Academy at NC State University. Before joining NC State in 2021, she spent a decade at Harvey Mudd College in Mathematics Department, where she also served as Associate Dean. In addition to her academic roles, she has worked on health and education policy for a U.S. senator and served as deputy director of a nonprofit. Her research spans fluid mechanics, mathematical modeling education, and interdisciplinary collaboration. She is a fellow of the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics and has received numerous national awards for teaching and writing. Her work has been funded by organizations such as the National Science Foundation, the Research Corporation, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, NCDHHS, and Data.org. Today, Dr. Levy will present on building idea exchange between data scientists, digital humanists, and artists in an age of AI. For those of you who joined a few minutes before the talk, and she was telling me the story of how she put together this talk, and it was really, really interesting. And over the past two decades, machine learning and AI have reshaped scientific discovery, particularly in applied mathematics. At the same time, interdisciplinary collaborations between scientists and artists have become increasingly impactful, helping to both advance technology and communicate scientific knowledge to wider audiences. Dr. Levy will discuss the evolving relationship between data science, digital humanities, and the arts, as well as the challenges and opportunities posed by generative AI, ranging from intellectual property and copyright concerns to the veracity and physicalization of AI-generated results. And then, of course, these similar interesting developments and challenges are in medicine as well, where just, most of our audience will be very interested. Following her presentation, we will have time for questions. Please feel free to submit your questions in the chat, and we will address as many as possible during the discussion. With that, I'm honored to turn the floor over to Dr. Levy. Rachel.
Thank you so much. I can't see any of you.
Turn your video cameras on if you can, please. So that
if you'd like to turn your cameras on, you're very welcome to. Please don't feel obligated. If you want to introduce yourself in the chat, it would be kind of interesting for you to introduce who are you, why did you come to this particular talk, and also have you engaged lately with any of the artists, creatives, folks, and if so, does that in any way intersect with your work? Like, do you go to the art museum sometimes for a particular kind of experience, and then does that relate to your work? I'll just mention my mom was a dance therapist in a hospital for quite a while, and I know there are art therapists in hospitals as well, so you do have creatives in your mix, bringing the arts into medical environments. So I think it's really interesting to continue to think about how that plays into the work that you do. So I'll be really interested to hear who you are and why you're here, but also afterwards, if anybody wants to connect on this topic, I'd be really happy to connect. All right. So I wanted to mention that when I wrote this talk about maybe a few months ago, I used the word artist, but I'm hearing the word creatives instead of artists a lot more. And so use those terms interchangeably. And also, I just love the way when you give a talk and get out there and say things, then you learn what you don't know. You learn how to be more current. So maybe I'm talking about creatives, which maybe would be broader than just people who do visual arts, for example. So my goal is really to inspire you to consider how interdisciplinary collaboration might transform and enhance your work. I'll also say my slides are a little wordy, and that's for accessibility purposes. So, if you're listening or seeing, you have more ways to access what it is I'm saying. I also want you to consider what the role of the arts might be and the role of AI might be in such future collaborations. So from 2001 to 2015, my work was in applied mathematics, and it usually involved collaborating with physicists, and we were modeling the motion of fluids. So here's a poster from one of my collaborators. This was really typical. You know, you'd have this introduction, you'd have applications. This is a medical application, so we were studying surfactants in the alveoli of the lungs. We were trying to understand how those fluids moved. So we'd have a picture of an alveolus, and then we'd immediately go to some equations, some mathematical equations to describe how the fluid was moving. Then the physicist, that would be the mathematician's work, and then the physicists would do experiments. And then we would do some sort of analysis where we were comparing the experimental results, which were created explicitly to do what the model said, to see if the model was correct. And if somehow there was a mismatch, we might change the model or we might change the experiment, and until we sort of had a match that would say that then the model was able to make predictions about what would happen if you change something in the experiment. So that's about the game that we play in my profession. And what I really loved about this kind of collaboration was it was quite bidirectional. So it wasn't like the physicists were always telling the mathematicians what to do, or the mathematicians were telling the physicists what to do. We each had to listen to each other, learn from each other, change what we were doing, see things differently, do things differently because of the collaboration in order to make it work. And then sometimes the results of our work was quite beautiful. So this is same collaborator, Karen Daniels. She's still in physics at NC State. Her work, if you ever look at her website at this address, is it's always very beautiful to look at generally, in addition to in terms of describing phenomenon, extremely novel in terms of understanding granular flow and surfactant flow. So doing all this work in fluid mechanics that actually was sort of beautiful inspired a course that I taught with an artist, with a photographer, in which students were doing experiments with fluids and then photographing them, both as a way to learn about concepts like viscosity, surface tension, things that show up in the equations that I showed you on that other page, but then playing with them through the act of making art, photographing that art, and then talking, the artists and physics students that were taking the class, talking to each other about how they thought about those things differently. So we really explored these interdisciplinary and disciplinary conversations and produced some shows and books. And this exchange of ideas really transformed our perspective, our communication, and our practices. For example, one day Ken Fandel, the photographer, was teaching the class, and he was showing us an image of something red. And he said to me, if humans see red in any context, the connotation, the visceral response to that is that it's blood, and it's a very strong reaction. That's interesting because I work at NC State. I'm wearing red every day. Everything around here, we are surrounded by red. You see red behind me. And so according to Ken, my whole environment is blood. And as doctors, you may be used to that environment as well. I don't feel like I have a strong visceral reaction to that color. I actually love the color. Maybe I love blood, but it was interesting to me. And the physics students were like, no, it's a wavelength of light. It has nothing to, sure, blood happens to be red, but red is a physics concept, right? It's a color, it's a wavelength. But then what you could see in the physics students' art, them start to play with the color red in ways that were quite evocative. And then you could see Ken starting to use more physics language and principles of playing with how he was creating his art. And so I really loved the way, again, that extended period of time exchanging disciplinary ideas and perspectives changed the way both of us, all of us, saw the world, and also how we interacted with it and did our work. So here I am with my students in my lab doing a very typical lab experiment, like one of the ones you saw a picture of before. And these experiments were really created for a particular purpose. As I said, we'd have a mathematical model, and we'd try to create an experiment that would demonstrate that model could predict things that would happen if we tweak the experiment this way and we tweak the thing in the mathematical model, that the results would be the same. And at that time that I was doing those experiments and teaching that class, there was a huge transition that was happening in scientific exploration. So like I said, from about 2001 to about 2015, my students' research, that we were doing in both academic and industrial contexts were all motivated by these physical problems. And for me, often by fluids, because that was my expertise. So how do lung medicines work? Why are they sometimes failing, especially in premature infants? How can you detect dangerous IV infiltrations without new technology? So we were working with CareFusion on that problem. They manufacture IV drip pumps. How can you improve satellite control working with Space Systems L'Oreal? So great problems. This is just a few of the problems I worked on with students. And when we did this, we were always using basically the scientific method that little kids learn in school. So what's that scientific method? It looks something like this. I recently gave this talk in Korea and Taiwan. They said this all looks very familiar to them as well. So internationally, this scientific method is pretty well known. You make an observation, you ask some questions, you have a hypothesis, you make a plan, you have that carefully designed experiment to sort of work out your plan to get your data, and then you do some analysis on that data. Maybe you have to go back to the starting board at some point, but if you're able to, you draw a conclusion. If you can't, you kind of go back and rinse and repeat and try again. Okay, so that's what we were doing. And, it's what a lot of people still do. But around 2015, we were getting a whole different set of industry questions. And it was all about, we have a flood of data and we would like to get some value from it, or we don't even know how to deal with it. Can you help us deal with our data? So all of a sudden, every question we were answering, especially for industry, seemed like an anomaly detection question. Can you tell me when my internet traffic is weird? Can you tell me when I'm doing some sort of drilling and it's about to be dangerous? So we were looking for patterns and trends in the data. Can you tell me how to identify this in a picture? Can you tell me how to distinguish this from that? A lot of image processing type questions. So it was super interesting how quickly this happened as a result, basically, of some tools coming out that were able to do this work, but also as a result of cheaper sensors, cell phones being in everyone's hands, collecting all kinds of information, faster processing, more storage, all of these things. So this image is just a cost per gigabyte drive just going down in terms, so this is just a storage graph. But really all these things together, meaning that not only are we collecting the data, but we can actually store it and then analyze it, and we can analyze it faster. So it was fun to work on those new kinds of questions with students. And we were noticing that all of these ideas about what algorithms could do in the industry context, in the academic context, in the human context, that were really imagined a long time ago, could now be tested and put into action. And that's where we start seeing people call things like machine learning or algorithm. We hear them start calling it AI. It starts getting called AI, I think, by the public when you're able to use your language, a natural language interface, and ask a machine to do something. The machine does it not using human language, right? It does it using algorithms, using math, statistics, etc., computational sciences, and discipline knowledge, and whatever gets baked into that model, it does it. And then it comes back and can present a result, again, potentially in a human comprehensible format. That's when we start, in my mind, calling it AI, even when it's things we would have totally called other things like machine learning or mathematical modeling or statistical modeling. They all get rebranded data science, and then they get rebranded AI. They get branded data science when all of those things come together, and they get rebranded AI, I think, when that natural language interface starts being more prevalent. And so for the public, it starts seeming like the things that they recognize from the movies a lot more. So those ideas about what machines can do is, in some sense, what we've decided we want machines to do is a collaboration between the science fiction writers who 100 years ago were imagining what machines might do if they could behave more like humans. That's not a new concept, but also the technologists who got inspired by those ideas and decided to try to make it true. So I give a lot of credit, for all of this to the imagination of creatives a really long time ago. And a lot of times the technologists follow the creatives and say, hey, maybe I can actually make that work. also technologists can be creatives, of course. Now, just as a side note, I must mention that my husband Sam says imagination about advances in technology is not always aligned with reality. For example, in your favorite science fiction movie, you may have a robot that seems almost human-like and a spaceship that's complete junk, right? They're like, my machine's going, I can't go, right? It's miserable. And yet, you know, they're telling the computer, like, make ship work faster, and the ship's like, okay, I'll try to do that better, you know, and the ship is like responding perfectly well, but clearly the tech is junk, and that somehow seems incongruous. So all of this new algorithmic problem solving driven by data and relying on these algorithms, in my mind, sort of tipped or inverted the scientific method in terms of how we were practicing our science. And of particular interest was, where is the role of data and algorithms in all of this process, right? Where does it come into the process? And so in my mind, if you use the same coding that we had on the right, so on the right, number 6, is data, and it's pretty far along in the process because you kind of have to decide what it is you're studying, then you got to set up the experiment. These days we collect data, and because we can store it and share it and communicate it and wait till later, we are often taking data sources that were collected for an entirely different purpose and now deciding we're going to ask some questions about it. And then we even saw that happening in 2015 when the companies were coming to us and saying, okay, we turned a camera on in our warehouse, but we have no idea what it picked up, right? We put a sensor on our whatever. We didn't, because we could, but not for any particular purpose. But now we'd like to get some value out of the fact that we did that. So asking some questions and then using that to potentially train and test and build an algorithm, test those results and communicate the solution. So it's not like all the pieces and parts aren't there, but this idea of doing science with data that wasn't collected for the purpose of the science, maybe in medicine, that's maybe in your discipline, it's not so new in the sense that I think, you know, people always look back a little bit to see what we could understand from the past. But I think it's been accelerated. And I think it's interesting to think about what are the complexities introduced in medicine in particular. I think a lot about, even if you had the same instrument in 2 different hospitals, did it matter that it was different temperatures? Did it matter that it was a different time of year, right? That those data were taken? Does it matter that the climate was different, that it was more humid? You know, what are the contextual things that matter that we don't necessarily record when we record the data, so that later when we try to draw inferences from that data, we can't even reconstruct what was happening that day. And we know that from physics because, for example, in the experiments we did, humidity was really a factor. And we're in North Carolina where humidity varies greatly. So how do you build a lab environment that's more controlled? In terms of humidity was something we had to figure out. So my current job as executive director of the NC State Data Science and AI Academy is really to turn NC State into a data science and AI university. I've been here 4 years. It's been super fun. We were allowed to announce that we are a data science and AI university last year, which is just amazing. And we're working with all colleges, all departments, all students, staff, faculty, and partnerships, extension, and beyond. So here's a concept slide from before I ever got back to NC State, from not mine, but another person's 2020 pitch to start this unit. And so they said that the goal was really to make sure that data science could be for everyone. So the very first thing that I did when I came, first of all, was we were going to teach in all disciplines. Remember, I talked about interdisciplinarity. So we built a teaching and learning model that we've now implemented with students from between 100 and 150 degree programs, students, staff, faculty, adult learners. So if you're interested in teaching and learning project-based, I'm happy to talk to you about this. We've been funded to study this and super excited to share it, but not the topic of this talk. What we did first another first thing that we did when I got here was collaborate with artists. And so collaborating with artists in the humanities was part of what we did from the start. So Killian Manning on the left and Luna Vanneman on the right collaborated with me on a project to really communicate the data sciences for everyone. So what we did was we found some spaces on campus that everyone goes to. They're considered hallowed spaces or common spaces. And Killian interviewed faculty from every single college. So you can see our colleges around here, data sciences for everyone. These are all the colleges. And then created 15 different videos that highlight with the voices of these faculty from different disciplines, how data science plays into their discipline or how it's part of what they do, so that we could really see from the very start. And then there are dancers. These dancers include non-dancers, professional dancers, people from the university, people not from the university, coming together in these places to convey these ideas. And so really fun. It's online if you want to see this. So that was just a first artist in residence project that we had. And subsequently, we hired postdocs from the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, the College of Education, that study that ADAPT model that I was talking about, and also teach classes in data ethics, data communication, social network analysis, all kinds of things, workshops. And you can see on the left, one of our postdocs giving a talk. He's actually, his study in his dissertation was on medieval manuscripts and sort of how you can see who's in power by who was asking the king for things, who was not included, who was talked about, but couldn't have been making the petition, and those kinds of things. In the middle, you see a wall from a data science conference where people are just trying to do a visualization of the community and things they care about. And that'll come back. The middle image will come back in a minute. And then on the right, you see some students with a map of North Carolina and broadband access. This next slide is from when I recently visited Taiwan. You can see a really similar kind of data visualization on the left, where strings are connecting different nodes. And the data visualization on the right is what kinds of books do you like to read based on what generation you are. So, you know, this algorithmic problem solving approach, this data-driven approach has in enacting that approach, some really critical issues that I'm sure you're aware of have been raised, that I think have always been a part of what people think about in arts and humanities. So who's actually present in the data, what's missing, right? What got used that shouldn't have been used as data, who's benefiting from the work, who's harmed by the work, what assumptions or biases are encoded. And when I say that, you know, you need to encode assumptions, you need to encode biases in your models, because you want your models to do the things you want them to do. So you want to bias them towards doing the things you want them to do. But you also can include biases in models that you don't want to have there, or you don't even realize are there. Can the conclusion or recommendation be explained? So transparency, explainability, and you know, and also uncertainty, right? Are you sure? You're never 100% sure generally in data science or science in general. So what are your error bars and how do you communicate those things? What are the contexts? So all these kinds of questions about data science and AI that have come up. So the challenge that I'm really issuing you today is, as you engage in data science and AI, how can we bring data scientists, including computer scientists, mathematicians, and statisticians, together with humanists and artists into spaces, and I'll include medical scientists and researchers and practitioners, into spaces where they can get to know each other and learn about each other's expertise and begin to consider collaboration. A lot of times when people engage artists, they kind of have a make my thing pretty kind of attitude. And that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm really talking about something transformative, right? Where you never do your work the same way because an artist helped you experience or think about that work differently. And they don't think about their art the same way because when they're doing something, they think about it differently. So truly transformative collaboration. To do this, I have been going to the Academic Data Science Alliance meeting. If you're not aware of this, this is a national meeting. I've enjoyed it very much. And each year they allow me to bring an artist so far. So this is an artist, Jackie Warnemont. She's at Dartmouth. This visualization demonstrates the energy sources that are currently being used. And then you physically, as the audience, weave the renewables forward and the non-renewables backward to try to meet energy goals for the future, according to the UN or some other group. And so this is a data physicalization where the audience can talk about the data, engage with the data, engage with the art, touch the art. You could call it a data physicalization or a data visceralization. Also, I've engaged this creative prepared a piano, and the piano plays according to algorithms, and the algorithm is adaptive according to what it hears both in the environment and from the piano itself. So this is sort of the way it works, it kind of makes a humming sound that changes over time. So it's sort of a continuous sound that changes in tone over time. And so we brought, so in this picture, you can see the person who did the AI for the prepared piano, the person who created the concept and the piano itself, me, and then Killian Manning, who did the dance pieces for NC State that I showed you. And then Killian did a workshop for the data scientists. So here you see the data scientists at the workshop, including the chief data scientist of the United States, engaging in a dance workshop where they are physicalizing data that they have created in that space together. So again, it was amazing to see, you know, like the head of data science at all these different programs across the United States having this experience together, which honestly not only helped them think about data differently, but we have that now common experience that we've had together as creatives. And I think that has changed the relationship in the community of the individuals to each other as well. And then this year I brought Dasana Hanu, who's in the middle of that left picture, who's our artist in resident at NC State this year, spoken word artist, and a spoken word artist also who is local in Michigan, to do a panel. And then Dasan did a workshop on communication for data scientists. And so these collaborations have really influenced the way our unit runs conferences, writes proposals, thinks about our educational programs and our communication. And just as evidence of that, we ran an education summit, and there were some activities there that involved creative arts. And this person, Pulkit, who came, he's an entrepreneur. He's not an educator. And he came sort of to see what we were doing in the data science space. And he said, you can see everything was visual, interactive, and dynamic. It fundamentally evolved how I think about education, and it inspired me to attend more education conferences. And this is super important because when we have entrepreneurs coming into education spaces, we need them to engage with teachers and educators, and creating really interesting environments for them to do that, get to know each other, and be creative together was transformative for him. And I was super excited that he was willing to share these quotes with us. So AI is raising tough questions, right? I put a bunch on the slides before. I could generate tough questions forever. How do we aggregate data, right, that was collected for totally different purposes? How are we going to pay for all the work that's used to train AI? Who will be considered intelligent in the future, right? How are we evolving this concept? If we're going to call it AI, and we're not going to call it machine learning, and we're going to use this idea, this word intelligence with machines, what does that mean in terms of the range of what we think of as intelligence in the future? How is it evolving, our idea of intelligence? How are we going to generate the water and the power to train and run the AI? I don't know about you all, but we've been asking questions like, what is North Carolina's capacity to run AI at the rate it's growing? It's unclear that we have the water and power capacity to do that at this point. And as I asked before, which biases do we want to allow or encourage in these models? So I really want you to get some artists and humanists potentially in the room sooner, not just to communicate an end product, and maybe, you know, in the data collection process and in the question asking times, as well as in the interpretation and other moments. So challenging you to think about, you know, could you do that? Dr. Gherkin and I did work on a project together. We had a seed grant between Wake and NC State, and so excited to think more about where that might head into the future. And something we never considered, right? We were so excited to we thought we were being pretty cutting edge to bring together medical practitioners and data scientists and people who are experts on sensors. That was complicated enough, to be honest, right? We brought together these three groups, but I even asked myself, like, how would this, you know, convening that we did, the summit that we did, how would the work we did, and how would the work these researchers do be different if we had also thought about including creatives in this process? And so again, I think even me and people I have collaborated with, we can challenge ourselves in the future to think about what could that mean? Because creatives bring things into a space that I think very few others can. So the arts are going to continue to be critically important in my mind to help us explore and communicate what it means to be human, what it means to be machine, and what that means for our future. On the upper right is a data scientist and artist and dancer who dances with an industrial robot called Kuka. You can look up this work online. Huang Yi, and he is really interested in a lot of things like, if I'm dancing, could I use AI to give a verbal description of that performance so that if you were blind, you could also experience the performance through the words generated by AI to go along with the motions that I'm making? And how could we do that in a more automated way, in the same way that we now can caption the meeting that we're having today more automatically, but we're beginning to be able to generate alt text for visuals. We don't really have that for a complicated stage performance or something, so that someone blind, especially with something like dance, could have that accessibility. So he's working on that. I'm super excited to see what he comes up with. So I'll just leave you with this idea that the key to solving the wicked problems of today and tomorrow are interdisciplinary collaborations. And when we do that, we do it not with parallel play or with one discipline acting simply in service of another, but truly transformative interactions that are inherently greater than the sum of their parts. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. This is amazing. It just broadened up our horizons. Just, I think when our center started, we reached out to people from different disciplines. I talked to, and then we collaborate with our law school, and we went to our business school. But one area that I realized we are missing is the creatives, and it's the old cliche of right brain, left brain type of thing. It's just, I think it's further than that, but I think it is going to make a big difference. When I was listening to your talk, I just remembered that our cancer center director was visiting MoMA, and then he sent me a picture from there. I'm just going to share it for a second.
Oh, that's so great.
Yes, just, and then just for everybody's pleasure, just, and then of course he said, as you see, his just, development of AI is so easy, and but it is amazing that I think artists are and creatives are more involved in AI than we involve them in AI. So just, I have a lot of ideas, and I think we can also collaborate. I completely agree with you. We probably need to, it looks like you have quite a bit of experience in involving creatives in the AI processes, and not only to make things beautiful, but really in every step of the process. So I will certainly chat with you on how we can look into those. And I also Googled, apparently Wake Forest has an artist in residence, and our Sawtooth School has an artist in residence. So I'll be making appointments to talk to them and then see how we can incorporate them in our processes. But I just want to thank you and clap, and just, on behalf of everybody. But let's open the floor for questions. And I'm sure you just tickled a lot of people's imaginations, and that they may have some questions. Are there any questions? I see Chris.
Yeah, thanks for that talk. My mind was going 1,000 different places there. I have daughter who is in art school right now at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts.
Yeah.
And I know her and her art school friends are repulsed when they detect anything computerized or AI is involved in any type of art. It's a visceral repulsion to think that a computer made that drawing. And I also know about some of my artist friends who are musicians, you know, if they detect like the song was auto-tuned or used AI to make it sound in the style of, or maybe even to help write the lyrics. So it's almost like these things have to be cleverly disguised, or there is some human repulsion to thinking we're being tricked in some way. And I think about the way art is used to soften scientific results. You know, there's a discipline called visual facilitation where someone will draw almost like a cartoon-like representation of results at a conference, and that's another way to interact with information. You know, some people are more visual learners. But I also note that data scientists and those who interact with machines through queries, we have to be creative in many ways. Computer programmers, you have to come up with creative solutions to make the technology work for you. So I don't really have a question, but I just, my mind was going a million places, and I think creativity and creative types are so important in using technology. And I thank you so much for really pressing the issue there. And I think it's great.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. And I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear some other voices before I say more.
You look like Deborah. Deborah, you look like you have a comment or question.
Oh, please.
If you can turn on your microphone, please.
I couldn't find my mic button, so sorry about
Okay.
that. I'm working off of
That's
different
all right.
systems. Thank you so much. This was so intriguing. And from a health informatics, health administration background, I'm just thinking about how AI can be used to help stimulate those to appreciate the arts when they can't see it and they can't hear it. And to me, that's so invigorating to help maybe an elderly person with Alzheimer's or someone who is comatose to somehow impose upon them using AI the sense of music, the sense of joy, the sense of happiness. And I just commend you for taking this and bringing this to light for everybody. So thank you. Not really a question, just appreciation.
I wonder if you have dance therapists in your hospital environments, because at least just learning from my mom, she worked with patients that were nonverbal, but if she could move with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they would often like move together. She could sense things, and then she could verbalize sometimes some things that they were communicating physically that they would not have communicated with words. And at times really made breakthroughs, you know, in addressing psychological needs or even physical needs of the patients, because there was this other mode of, so in addition to patients for whom dance had been a part of their life, social dance or other kinds of more formal dance, or just liking dancing, or just moving, you know, just having that permission to put on, connecting to the music that they cared about, music of a particular time, music that evoked a particular feeling. And then all the art therapy that, you know, goes on with kids, you know, I think those, again, like bringing all that and evaluating that within a hospital space as really important points of connection for patients and doctors, so that the doctors are even maybe present for some of that to understand what's going on. I think it's an interesting, so, you know, and again, you know, just thinking forward to assistive technologies being more robotic or being more AI, it's just also interesting to think about both. Is it different if it's a human connection? You know, those robots aren't going to feel. They're not, right? They don't, that they might have they will sense, they have sensors, but they won't, as far as I know, they're not going to feel. That's what science fiction explores a lot, right? I mean, science fiction explores a lot, is feeling a connection, is feeling inherently human trait, or could there be some machine version of feeling? And I would argue there's absolutely a machine version of sensing, but I don't know for feeling. Again, not my field, but just from interacting with the field. So thanks for raising those observations.
Yes. I just looked it up because I know that there were some grants, and then actually our Wake Forest has a program, and it's one of the few, very few in the country, and it's called Wake Forest Baptist Performing Arts Medicine Program. And then some of the common conditions treated includes tendonitis, stress fracture, bony stress injury, and then many of the providers involved in this program have personal backgrounds in performing arts, former or current actors, musicians, dancers, and artists. And then Chris would be very happy to hear this, that the University of North Carolina School of the Arts is our official sports and performing arts medicine partner. So this is interesting. And then he also noted that there was a conference last year, I think, dance medicine conference. But it is amazing that we are already incorporating arts as part of our patient care, but we can do more within the context of AI. Just, and I think I can imagine seeing creatives as part of the AI teams, in addition to lawyers and, business people, ethics people, health equity researchers, maybe some creatives from different backgrounds be a part of those teams. And it will really make a big impact on how we develop these algorithms, how we assess these algorithms, what the impact will be. Just, I think it's going to make a huge difference for algorithm development, and even just deciding on which algorithms we should be developing could be important. Just as Deborah mentioned, just some people have visual or other challenges, and then how we can use the power of AI to help those people and then patients. That can be really, really interesting and exciting.
Yeah, I was wondering, I always think about when people ask me what I'm excited about for the future, I always say personalized medicine.
Yeah.
I'm really excited that the dosage that's given to me for a problem is modified appropriately, regularly, based on some sort of feedback loop of what's happening, which is, generally not what happens. You get a 90-day supply, and then you get a refill. You're not really responding much to anything that's happening. You're just presuming that whatever, if it's good enough and you're still kicking, then it's all good. So I'm excited, super excited about some of those feedback systems. But what if arts were part of the prescription, right? Like, what if we knew in general that connecting a person with the appropriate arts was increase their health? And so part of what you're prescribing in personalized medicine are ways for people to connect with artistic endeavors that are a good match for their condition and their needs. And then how do you tune that over time and see whether that's interesting and suggest other things? Because we make prescriptions for a lot of things, exercise and good diet, and those things are great. But I also, as we become more, as we are concerned that what is human in the workplace may be replaced, right? And we have this opportunity to replace the things that humans are kind of terrible at and don't even like to do. But potentially don't replace the things that humans really thrive from doing or love to do. And again, if AI could make more time in my day for the arts, I would be really happy.
Yeah.
Or could be integrated more into my daily work, I would be happy. Because often I'm doing things in the arts on top of, in addition to, as an extracurricular, not as my extra vocational, not as my work.
Yeah. I would be interested in hearing, we have some physicians in the audience. Marty, I don't know if you are at a place where you can turn your microphone on. I would be very interested in hearing what his thoughts are, because just, Marty is one of our faculty. He's a physician, and then also he's, an informatician and an AI, involved in AI for many, many years. And I wondered and then he also has the advantage of living in one of the cities with some of the best art scene. So and I know that he enjoys art and performances a lot personally. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Marty. Sorry, I put you on the spot.
I'm used to it, Matt, and you've done it before, so that's okay. No, I think it's fascinating. There's so many things that can affect a person's health that we have never anticipated, and ways we can induce healing. I was at a meeting a couple of years ago where using a virtual reality and treating patients with strokes, as they put on a VR headset, and if somebody has a stroke with right-sided paralysis, they put them through exercises, but they use the virtual reality to switch which side is moving, and they found that by making people think that they're moving their affected limb, it actually improves their recovery. And so anything involving motion, or addressing parts of the human perception that are not the traditional narrow roles of medicine, seem to me like a fascinating opportunity. And what you've been talking about here is right there. And your preference for personalized healthcare, that's sort of my major thrust. Is most of the evidence that we have in healthcare are population studies. We have large numbers in Group A and Group B, and on average, Group B does better than Group A. That becomes the treatment, but it doesn't address all the people that did not do well, or the people in the group that on average didn't do well, did better. And so, anything that we can address or helps us to understand why patients are different and respond differently into that which they respond, I think is a key resource. AI becomes a key resource in that. So yes, I found this quite interesting.
Thank you.
Well, just, I heard about a study. They looked at the healing times of patients who went through some kind of orthopedic surgery, and some of the patients' room looked at greenery and a forest, and then the others didn't. Those who are just, rooms faced the forest or greenery healed faster. So just, when I read these things, it's just, it's fascinating. Just, is there a way we can create environments for our patients that's more healing, and then incorporate more art or performances, and then just I think it's fascinating. We need to look into that. It's just I don't know.
Yeah, along those lines, you all tell me if this is true. On NPR yesterday or the day before, there was a story that made a claim that laughing, fake laughing, induces some of the same endorphins and good health as real laughing. And so, of course, my staff, I reported this to my staff, and then one of my staff members last night, of course, this is not a study, N equals 1. But one of my staff, I told them that I had maniacally laughed all the way home, and it would be terrifying. And then I demonstrated such maniacal laughing, and they said, "You may never do that again in the office because it's terrifying." I was like, that's just because you hear me real laugh all the time, and you know the difference. But then some of them reported that they were fake laughing on their ways home, and they felt a lot better. And so that leads me back to this forest idea. Like, is painting a forest on the wall halfway there, right? Or what are the aspects of that? Or is putting an aquarium or nature on the television as a screensaver as opposed to something else? Like there may be some also intermediate steps that are possible even when I work in an office with no exterior windows. What should I be doing in my office to make sure we are healthier, right? Given that we may not be able to have plants or this or that. So all of these things are so wonderful. And I guess I should just also take a moment in a healthcare setting to thank you all, because I know that, this is not an easy time to be in the health space. I used to be on a program called Math for Nurses, where we were really exploring the idea of could every floor in a hospital have a quant nurse, so that if nurses were a little concerned about a calculation, there was someone they could go to without fear of chastisement for needing a refresher on something. Could we have more quant nurses? And that was pre-COVID, and then going through COVID, just having those connections and at least in a tiny bit understanding how tough it has been then and since then with all the retirements to be in this space. Thank you for still being in this space and supporting us all in our health, because it's just super important.
That's very
really appreciate.
Yeah, that's very kind and thoughtful. Ray, I actually was watching a show yesterday, and it just said that happiness heals, and I just remember that. So it is connected to what you said. There is actually a type of yoga. It's called laughing yoga, and then I took one of those classes, and I highly recommend to you, Rachel. Ray, yeah, just if you want to take one of those courses, I think you will find it fascinating. Alva Jones asked, she's the chair of computer science at Winston-Salem State University. Both Rachel and I actually, we were panelists at Winston-Salem State University. It was last year, right?
Yeah.
Yes, she's the chair, and then she's asking if you could share your contact information.
Absolutely.
So for further.
Should I just put that back in the chat maybe?
If you can please put it in the chat so that some people may want to reach out to you. And then I will certainly reach out to you to see what kind of activities we can do together. And then we can just really combine whatever you are doing with creatives at the intersection of data science, AI, maybe a scientific process, and then we can fold in some medicine to that group, and then see what kind of changes we can make. We are all here for good changes, for good changes. If there are there any other questions before we wrap this up? Okay. I don't see any others, but I saw a few people thanking you for your interesting and fascinating presentation, and I agree with them. And then thank you so much, Rachel. You really brought a really interesting angle to what we are doing in the AI space in medicine. And then we really, really appreciate it. This was above and beyond. Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice
afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and look forward to connecting with you all in the future.
Sounds good. Have a nice afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending. Bye-bye.